Welcome to By His Grace podcast. Not worthy, but worth it. I am Tansha, and I would like to welcome you to the podcast. I would like to welcome you to the podcast where I get to sit and speak with guests who are willing to share their stories of living by God's grace. Have you ever felt like you were God's chosen one? Have you ever felt like God's purpose for your life is where you are exactly right now?
Oh,
Right now, I have with me Jacqueline Ward. Hello, how are you?
hello. Hello. How are you doing this evening?
I am well. I am well. Thank you
Sorry about
so
that.
much for being a part of the podcast. And I am grateful that you accepted the invitation. I was sharing with the people about being chosen. And I want to formally introduce you so they can know who you are and they can get an understanding of what we are about to hear from you being the chosen one of God. As
Okay.
stated, I have with me Jacqueline Ward. She's a mother, a wife, an author. She holds a bachelor's degree in medical technology, master's degree in counseling education, master of business administration degree. She has 30 years of corporate experience in the nonprofit sector. She's the retired COO of Lighthouse Church in Houston, Texas. She's a member of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated sorority, a member of the Houston chapter of National Negro Women. So we thank you for being on the podcast and welcome once again.
Well, thank you so much, Chantel, for having me. I'm just excited about spending some time with you and the audience this evening. So, again, thank you so very much.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. It is such a pleasure and an honor to have you on the podcast. So let's get started and let's hear about the wonder works of God in your life. Using one word, who is Jacqueline?
Jacqueline is driven.
Driven. And what does that mean to you?
Well, that means that I'm so very driven. When I'm given a task or a vision, something to accomplish, that's what it is for me. It's no stops. I'm focused and I work toward that goal. And I always have something going on. It's like, my family and friends say, slow down, slow down. I'm like, okay, I am slow. I'm slow. But that's just who I am. That's how I'm wired.
Oh, excellent. So you believe in getting the task, getting the assignment, and working until it's completed,
Absolutely.
leaving no stones unturned.
That's it.
That's excellent. So that's motivation for a lot of people because some people are procrastinators
Yes.
and they live in a state of procrastination. So being a driven person and one that's focused, I'm sure sometimes it's a challenge when you have to work with people who are procrastinators, right?
Yes.
How do you overcome that?
Oh God, lots of prayer. But really, really, I have the tendency to slow down because I like to teach. And from my background, as you see, I have the educational background, so and the counseling, so I can read people and know how I can kind of bring them down based on how they're behaving. So even though I'm driven and I'm focused, and there's someone I'm working with who procrastinates, I'm able to slow it down for them.
Oh, good.
Slow it down and try to find that happy medium where we're working in sync with one another. So it becomes a task at times, but yet it's also a skill that one acquires.
Right. Taking the opportunity for a teaching moment.
Yes.
Good. Good. And that's necessary, especially when you're working on a team,
Yes,
because we
absolutely.
don't all function the same and we don't process it the same. So it takes a lot of patience to work on a team.
Yes.
So that's great. That's awesome to hear that you know how to make the adjustment to meet people where they are.
Yes.
What has been a personal accomplishment for you? Something that you are proud of?
Oh gosh. Well, actually, my most recent accomplishment in life, which has been the authoring my book Chosen from the Beginning, that has been the greatest personal accomplishment thus far in life. And it was a accomplishment that I really hadn't given much thought to. However, it was prophesied to me by Pastor Keon Henderson of the
Mhm.
Lighthouse Church. He said, there's a book in you. I think you should write a book.
Oh,
And I thought,
awesome.
"Oh." And when he said that, the gates just opened.
So you know
And
it was
it
confirmation.
was confirmation. It was confirmation. So I went right for it.
Great. And that's the key when you get a sound word from God. It confirms what God has already spoken to you. You shouldn't be surprised by the word. It confirms who God says that you are. And it's awesome that your pastor was able to speak it. Then you knew it was time to actually walk in it.
Yes. Yes.
Good. That is awesome. What has been a professional accomplishment that you are proud of?
Well, my greatest professional accomplishment was actually, it was also at the Lighthouse Church under the leadership of Pastor Keon Henderson. I was the chief operating officer there for 10 years. And I say that that's my proudest accomplishment because I wasn't just working for a check as in corporate America. You're
Mhm.
working, it's your career, that's what you do. I was actually chosen to do what I did. I was chosen to do what I was doing. And it became my greatest accomplishment because not only was I working for the organization, I was working for God's people. But more so than that, I was working to effectuate the kingdom. And that was just a joy like no other joy. So I consider that the greatest accomplishment in my professional accomplishment in my life.
Oh, excellent. And we always hear that only what you do for Christ will last anyway.
Absolutely, absolutely,
So the joy of it is when you become a servant of God and you're working in the kingdom of God, then you can say, Lord, now I know that I've surrendered myself to you because the kingdom is being edified.
absolutely, absolutely. And it's so much confirmation in that because I never saw myself working for a church. You know,
Mhm.
I was always in church. I always worked in the church as in ministry. But as far as the organization and building up the kingdom, I never thought I would do that. That was not part of my plan at all. But you know, we talk about God, how God direct us, and the confirmation from Pastor Henderson. What I realized when I started to work for the kingdom, I realized that God had been equipping me all my life,
Right.
right? Because I started working in the church as a young lady, back in South Carolina. And then I just, everywhere I went, I worked, I served. But in the workplace, I was doing so many different things. And you know, I worked in healthcare, learning how to have that sense of empathy and sympathy for families and for patients, right? I have a counseling degree that taught me how to understand grief, how to deal with people, how to problem solve, how to deal with conflict, all of these things. And then of course I went into corporate America, and it was twofold. One in corporate America, I was taught, you know, I have an MBA, so I was taught all about the financial side of life and systems, right? And then I was working on different I would work with attorneys, and I would work with contracts, and I would say sometimes, "Look, what does this have to do with anything?"
Right.
Right? I didn't get it. I didn't know. I was just following God's plan. And when I came to the Lighthouse Church and was chosen to be there, and chosen to be there, it all came so very clear to me that God had equipped me with so many different things for that time. He knew this is where my child will be.
Right.
This is where I'm going to place her, and she's going to be well equipped to do the job I have before her.
Right.
It became so very clear.
Right. Because God knew that Lighthouse Church was going to need you. And I need you to get all the training. I need you to be equipped with everything that ministry will need, and you will be the chosen one. I just need you to walk into it. So how hard was it to walk away from corporate America and do full-time ministry? Because most people don't think of themselves as doing full-time ministry. How difficult was that for you to walk away from corporate America?
Well, that's what's so interesting about all of this. And I would tell Pastor and others the story. It's like, I never imagined leaving corporate America. I was very happy. I was VP of the Federal Savings Bank there, trust officer there, and I had reached my goal. I was happy. I was content. I was going to be there. No problem. But God made it such that I wasn't to stay. And when God told me and made it very clear to me that I needed to be at Lighthouse, I saw myself gravitating more so to the church and less interested in my job.
Mm-hmm.
So God just told me it was time to go. It's so miraculous. It really, truly is. He said it was time to go, and he had put everything in place, and I did it. I walked by faith and didn't look back. And I shared that in my book. For those who will read my book, I shared that in my book because a lot of friends, family and friends thought, she must be nuts, leaving corporate America, making corporate America money, and going to a church in this stage in life. But that's when we have to know that it is ordained for you to be in a place. And I often say, you can't listen to the chatter, because when you listen to the chatter, that's the devil, the enemy confusing you, right?
Right.
So you have to not listen to the chatter. And I didn't listen to the chatter. God said it, he made a way, and it was such a smooth transition.
Yes, because the voice of God is so clear.
Very clear.
And it's very soft.
Yes.
It's not loud. It's not boastful. It's basically gently speaking into your spirit. That's how you know it's him. But you need to know his voice before he begins to speak to you in manners such as that. So you have to commune with him. So you will know that it's God speaking to you.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. How long were you at Lighthouse Church before you were placed into your chosen position? How long were you there?
I was actually there 2 years.
Okay.
About 2 years. About 2 years. I was there. And it was very interesting. The transition was very interesting, how I became a part of leadership there. When I joined the church, Lighthouse Church, I joined on the 2nd anniversary of the Lighthouse Church. And it was a difficult decision to join because I was happy where I was. There we go again. God had to move me from the place that I was. I wasn't looking for a church. I wasn't thinking about another church, but God said otherwise. So I ended up at Lighthouse Church. And after being a member for about 2 months, I called pastor's office and said I wanted a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And the admin says, what is the meeting about? And I said, it's to get to know my pastor. And she said, wow, no one's ever said that before. I'm like, okay. So I did. I had the meeting with pastor, and I sat down with him, and I said, Pastor, I joined the church about 2 months ago, and I said, I know you a little bit about you, because you talk about yourself during sermons, but you don't know me. And I want to make certain that you know me, because this is the third church I've ever belonged to. And I've had a really good relationship with each of my pastors and with myself and my family. And it's important to me that we have that relationship. So, he looked and he's like, okay. And he says, well, I know a little bit about you. And he says, on Sundays, you sit on this side and you smile. And then on Tuesday night, you sit over here. And I was like, oh, okay, okay. So we chatted about several different things, right? So in his office at that time, he had poster boards, poster paper all on the walls. And he started looking like, I know I can use you. And I said, no, I didn't come to be placed in the ministry. Yeah, I said, we'll walk away and you see what God says.
Mm-hmm.
And we left it like that. And he gave me his contact information, said, just give me a call. So about a couple of weeks later, he called for a follow-up. And when he did, it's so interesting. I had prepared for him a little document from good to great. And I said, well, Pastor, this is just some things I want to share with you, because being just sitting there and observing things, this is what I have. I think everything's is great, but you're born for greatness, and this ministry is born for greatness. It's birthed for greatness. And these are some things that I see.
Mm-hmm.
Say, oh, okay. So long story short, I became a part of the board, and he had asked me to do quality analysis for all of the ministries, getting to know the ministry leaders and helping them to get from good to great, just elevating them. And so I did that for a while, and then I just found myself right there working with him, various things. And we were about to purchase a new church, because we were in a school at that time. And then I started helping and finding myself just doing all these things and working my real job as well, right? Working my real job. And that's when I knew it was time. God was showing me. But I did that for a while, and then God spoke to me, it was time to go, and I did. I sent my boss the resignation letter and sent a copy to Pastor, and he simply cried. He's like, I can't believe God loves me enough to give me the gift of you. And I was like, oh my goodness. So I started working 2014 as the employee. I joined 2011, and I
Mm-hmm.
started working 2014 as the COO.
Oh,
And when I started, we had about 5,000 members, and when I retired, over 18,000.
wow. So
So
you actually watched him go from good to great.
yes,
And you are
yes,
part of the team that God knew that he needed at that time. So that's what surrendering to God is all about.
yes,
You are purposed for a season, and you actually did exactly what God sent you there to do. And your pastor, I know he loves you, because I heard him publicly praise you when I visited your church, and he speaks of you in such a loving and enduring way. How long did it take for that personal relationship to develop? Because business and doing what you do, he could appreciate and respect you in a business manner. But what I see that the two of you share is that he is grateful just to have you on his team beyond what you do with the books. How long did it take that, especially because he's a younger pastor?
yes. Well, that's interesting as well, because he's a younger pastor, and I was so much older, enough to be his mother. But our relationship just kind of just morphed. It just formed so wonderfully well. And I contributed that to the fact that, he's so ordained for the ministry and to be the pastor of the church. And his spirit of discernment is so great. And I think what really put him at ease in accepting me so well, because he didn't know me. I didn't know anyone at the church when I came, was simply because when we talked, it wasn't about me. And I really believe that the Holy Spirit showed him that I was really there to effectuate the kingdom.
Right.
I talked about what we could do for the kingdom, not what I could do, what we could do, and what I believed that God had ordained for that ministry. So I think we were, as you said, we were talking the same talk, right?
Mhm.
We were talking the same talk. We were in alignment, and it just happened because God had put it together. It wasn't something that man put together. It wasn't like, hey, this is Sister Ms. Williams. It wasn't that sort of thing. He met me, I met him, and God just showed us both who we were.
Right. And he probably can have such a great respect for how you came to him. And not even just the words, just that I want to get to know my pastor. And that's something that a lot of the pastors don't really get. People who generally want to get to know them. So many people ride the hype and they see how a pastor is growing and they see an image of a person and they fall in love with the image, but they don't take the time to say, I want to get to know you. Mm-hmm. I want to be a part of what you have going on here in the kingdom realm. Right. And so that's so admirable that you were bold enough to make that connection and say, this is where I need to be. Because it's hard to put your baby in someone else's hand.
Yes, yes.
And as the COO, it's basically saying, here, we're putting the baby in your hand and we need you to care for it. Mm-hmm. Are you up for the task? Yes. And you were up for the task because God chose you. Yes. For that season. How important is it in the role that you played at your church to have transparency and trust?
Oh, it's very important because trust and transparency is everything. Yes. Without trust, people will never ever follow you. Mm-hmm. And without transparency, they'll never trust you.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
So it is everything. And, I really never struggled with communication, and I always seek God's face. And it's very interesting because when I was in the role, well, my life, I guess, but more so in that role because I dealt with people and their feelings, and it was the kingdom. I would always say, Lord, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you.
Right.
And I asked him to guide my mouth and guide my feet, that all that I do will be pleasing unto him. And so I knew it wasn't about me. I always put him first and allowed him to use me. So as I was going through all of that, and you talk about transparency and all of that, he was leading it. He was leading it the whole time. And when I would meet with people and then have to pray with people, he would give you, as you know, as the elder, he would give you the words. He would give you what you need, and it's not you yourself. And that's the greatest thing of all, I think, when building that trust and transparency is just allowing God to use you.
Exactly. And once you have actually built the trust and transparency, people can respect your no. Mm-hmm. Because you don't always have to say yes. Right. When you have garnered the respect of the people. Mm-hmm. How did you handle when you had to say no? We can't do that. It's just not feasible. The timing is not now. I'm not saying it can't be done, but timing, because I know sometimes I've worked with pastors, and sometimes when they get it, they're so eager to run with it. Mm-hmm. And you being behind the scenes and seeing everything and seeing it in black and white, how hard was it for you to have to sometimes look at your loving pastor and say, no? Did you have those moments?
I'm sure I had those moments a few times, but it's a couple of things. One is my pastor. Um, he is one that really listens
Oh,
to
good.
reason, and he never carries the attitude that it's my way or no way, okay, or make you feel that you can't disagree. He listens, and there were times when maybe I didn't say no, but I said, well, this is the way I handle it. Is I think we really need to think about this, or
Mm-hmm.
have you thought about XYZ? Maybe we should do it this way. And he would sit back and he would listen. He would think about it, think about put it into logical perspective. We come back and we chat about it, and probably 90% or greater, we were aligned. It's amazing. I'm really serious. When God put it together, it's just together.
Right.
But we will be in alignment. But the no, I think God had equipped me so with when he allowed me to go into counseling. And I learned how, not knowing I was going to use it in the spiritual realm and religion, but I learned how to be gentle and how to reason.
Mm-hmm.
And no is just not a rough no. And again, go back to what you just said. When people trust you, that's it. They
Right.
trust you. They'll go along with you, whether they like it or not, but because they trust you. And I think it's all in your delivery.
Great. Great. And sometimes that can be what makes people build the wall.
Mhm.
The delivery, and then how they receive it. If they've never worked with you before, they really don't understand that it's from a place of endearment and
Right,
not attacks,
right.
because they've not worked with you. And because you were able to work with your pastor, that's key for people who look at a ministry such as yours and they wonder, how do I get from the 200 to the 1,000?
Mhm.
And with your partnership with your pastor, y'all were able to take the ministry through the guidance of God and wisdom from 5,000 to 18,000. So people need to know that pastors have to have an open mind.
Yes,
They have to be willing to listen to wise counsel, especially when it's coming from a place where God has purposed this
yes,
person to be here. You can't have that with everyone, but
yes,
the right ones, the ones that are on your team, because we know even with Jesus, he had 12 disciples, but he didn't bring all of them everywhere he went. He had his core
that's
group,
right.
Peter, James, and John. And when it's going down, this is who I need to have with me. All the other ones are my followers, but I need a core team. And your
Yes,
pastor was able to recognize that in you. And that's such a blessing for pastors to have members such as yourself that not only talk about it, but can execute it in such a way of excellence as you have done with the years that you have worked there and you're still there. What business strategy, if you had to tell young ministries that are aspiring growth, what business strategy would you feel this is a no-brainer? You must have these core things in order to get to where God would have you to be. Because if it's ordained by God, it's going to work.
yes,
But we know that you still have to have a business side.
yes, absolutely.
What would you offer them as some strategies, maybe one or two, just
Mhm,
key things they need to have?
mhm, mhm. Make sure your yes is your yes and your no is your no.
Right.
And also, the three things that always my professional acumen is: be consistent, be firm. And I mean, if you're firm, consistent, people know that What you say, your yes is your yes, your no is your no. And you're very firm and this is what we're going to do. So you have a made up mind. So I would tell them to always be fair, firm, and consistent. What you do for one, do for the other.
Right.
That's that fairness. But also those who are struggling, what I typically strategy I give them is to help them to develop an acumen of trust and transparency, which we talked about earlier. Because people who are working for them or alongside them have to trust them.
Right.
Trust that, they are who they say they are and that they will not let them fail. And then also, one of the things I tell young leaders is to be present, not just for the team, but with the team.
Mm-hmm.
You want them to know that we have a relationship. Yes, I am the leader, but we still have a collaborative relationship, meaning we're going to work together. I'm not going to ask you to do something I'm not going to do, and I'm here for your success.
Right.
And, that's what serving is all about. Whether you're a leadership role or a volunteer role, it's all about the people, all about the people, and just keep the people first and foremost.
Right. And a lot of people don't really understand the business side of ministry. And they get so, I guess, offended
Yes.
by the business side because they don't understand it. And in their minds, this is God's house and God is in control and God needs to do this and God needs to do that. And while we do know that is true, there is still a business side that must be handled in excellence in order for the church building and the operation to be in excellence. And that's sometimes a lot of people that don't get that. That's why they are offended by offerings. They are offended by the monetary side of it, but the lights have to be on.
Yes.
The staff has to be taken care of. There are business expenses that must be handled in a way of excellence. And when you go from 5,000 to 18,000, everything is shifting.
Everything.
Everything is shifting. So that's good for people to hear that it's more than just God's doing it his way. While we know he can and we know he will, but he puts people in place to handle his business affairs.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, and I do want to add is because it makes me chuckle here because when I first started as COO, there were, the congregation or the founding.
Your mic went out. Your mic went out. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Your mic went out. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what happened with her mic. I'm going to log off and come back on.